Good afternoon from our studio in Amsterdam. Welcome to everyone who's joining us. When you join, just introduce yourself briefly in the chat in the lower right-hand corner so I can say hello. I want to welcome Jacob, who's our keynote plenary fireside chat thought leader. And we'll talk a little bit about this partnership of TBLI and Isimo connection. Why are we working together? But basically, I'll give you some instructions about how this will go. We'll have a 1-hour webinar. Jacob will talk about his background, his solutions for telling stories. And you may pose questions. We'll address those questions in the chat area. After that, there'll be a 1-hour networking session, kind of Tinder speed networking, where you'll be connected every 5 minutes with someone else in the virtual room for a 5-minute video chat. So don't leave. Stick around. 5 o'clock, that networking will start on time. So if you just, okay, those are coming in now. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining, Lydia, Melissa, Arthur, and I see it. That's nice. And Beata, welcome. And Jacob, welcome from Utah. It's quite early for you there. The show is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. It's been an honor to be a part of the TBLI community. I think we first met at the Stockholm event and was blown away by just the caliber of individuals that you've curated and the people that actually care deeply about impact. And it's been my privilege to work with global brands since 2006, brands like Goldman Sachs or eBay, Google, Panasonic, in helping them craft their storytelling. And now in the last 3 to 4 years, we've had a pivot towards helping leaders in impact attract capital and inspire audiences through visual storytelling. My purpose today is help you, empower you to better be able to attract capital flows towards impact and leverage the power of your story. As we all know, the idea of valuation is really central to investment. What is something worth? How much do we value it? And let me tell you a quick story. When I was a kid, I grew up in Sacramento, California. And my first business venture was with my little sister. I was 6 years old. She was a year and a half younger. And we would, on Saturday mornings, we'd bake bread. And we'd take it around in our little red wagon and sell it door to door to our neighbors. And they'd pay us in quarters and nickels and dimes and sometimes in paper dollars. And I remember after our first sort of settling of accounts and dividing up the earnings, in my 6-year-old brain, I really thought, okay, so this metal stuff, these coins have got to be made of silver or something worthwhile. And so the way we divided it up was I took all the coins and she took all the paper dollars. And of course, as you can expect, she made off a whole lot better than I did, thinking that, okay, the coins were somehow more valuable than the dollar bills. And thankfully, I've learned the difference to tell the difference in the value between those. But I think it illustrates an interesting point that sometimes we value the wrong things, or we don't know how to value the right things of what we traditionally called hard, or like hard assets, hard facts, hard stats, hard numbers, hard physical assets that sometimes occupy more of our attention than things that tend to be undervalued, that are so-called soft stuff of relationships or network or brand or goodwill or storytelling or character or impact. Sometimes we don't count the right things. Sometimes we don't have the right valuation. Sometimes we think metal coins should be worth more than paper bills, but they're not. And what we value has a lot to do with the model that we're using. It's been 50 years from Milton Friedman's doctrine. And in a lot of ways, I see that as dark ages of economic thinking. If we think of like old school, like Ptolemy's view of the solar system, where everything revolves around shareholder profit And I believe it's a flawed model that has produced things like Enron and the housing crisis and rapidly escalating wealth gaps and a whole slew of other things. And I realize I'm preaching to the choir here. This is people who care about impact, realizing that our models lead us to how we value and what priorities we make. But I believe there's a renaissance, an enlightenment that's discarding this antiquated model for a more robust one. Not just a kinder, nicer one, but one that is more true and honest to all the costs and externalities of our investments. It's actually in our own self-interest to think sustainably, but most don't. And we're trying to change that. We're trying to change that by the stories that we're telling. You're trying to change that by the investments that you're trying to make and where we're putting capital. Some of you may have seen a film that we created for the Laudato Si Challenge at the Vatican. It's called Think a New Thought, and I think it embodies a lot of our philosophy and a manifesto of this new renaissance of thinking of the role of capital in society.
As a man thinketh, so is he. We've all heard that before. Do we really believe it? Do we really grasp that this world we live in is a byproduct of who we decide we are? As she thinketh in her heart, so is she. There's this notion that we've had stuck in our heads for so long, that the invisible hand of capitalism had to be a selfish hand, a hand without sympathy, that it simply wouldn't work any other way. But what if we were wrong? What if that's not true and never has been? People say a business's purpose is to make money, but it's not. A business's purpose is to fill a need for the market, and they get to thrive as a byproduct of how well they can do that. That's what the invisible hand actually is. That dance of cause and effect, aligning our individual self-interests with the common good. I get to benefit because I have given value to others. Instead of comprehending that, we persisted in the comforting delusion that there was a safe distance in time and space between us and whoever might bear the pain of our choices. And we fed ourselves the false narrative that the market somehow turned our selfishness into more hidden good than the harm we could clearly see it causing. So we simply don't see, because it's so easy not to. But the world is shrinking, and the world is suffering, and we must look. Those distances are no longer safe for any of us. There's no room anymore for fairy tales about the consequences of our actions. We are left at a choice. If we keep telling the story that the market requires the exploitation of the invisible and the poisoning of our earth, then that is what will be. But if we start to tell another story, that their interests are our interests, then that is what will be. What we believe is the crux of it. The market will work just the same. Maybe the dirty secret is it will work even better, free to focus on the needs of all its stakeholders. Maybe the dirty secret is there is a world richer than we can even imagine, sitting just on the other side of our foolish notion that we have to be unkind to each other to prosper. That is the secret, that capitalism, like any ism, is nothing more and nothing less than the magnifier of our intent. It will be whatever it is because of what we are. It does not make us, but only reveals us to ourselves. But if we quit now, If we stand by as innocents suffer and our world wanes, and say, the market can do so many great things, but not this one most urgent thing, then all we have revealed are the limits of our own vision and humanity. The long and short of it is we are the ones who choose. What we believe is all that seals our fate. As we think it in our hearts, so are we. And maybe it's time we think a new thought.
The stories that we tell have everything to do with how are we making meaning for ourselves and for those that we're trying to communicate with. I'll often get the concern or the question, just show me the facts, just the data. Especially in the financial industry, we're very oriented towards the numbers and what's in the spreadsheet and what can you show me. There's the old adage from 1950s show, Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am. And on some level, if we say we just want facts, well, here's just the raw data, and that data is the truth. Well, in a lot of ways, we can't handle the truth. We can't handle the myriad complexities. We can't handle all of the sheer volume of data. We have to reduce it, simplify, organize it in a way that we add meaning, we add context. We take this and translate it into, say, it's a balance sheet, what's actionable and what's relevant for me right now. And it might be a chart or a bar graph, or it might be a story. Even if we look at machine learning or AI or algorithms, are having to ignore the vast majority of data and find what's most relevant and find the patterns to make better decisions. Congratulations, that's storytelling. We're already having to do this as just human beings. We're hardwired to tell stories, and we have to organize and simplify. And especially as things get more complex, more nuanced, the stories that we tell, there's always a filter, and that filter is often brought into question, and it can be used to manipulate, and it can also be to help to clarify and illuminate. Doesn't that just lead to more greenwashing? Can't that just be used to manipulate or hide what's really happening? It's a tool that can be used for good or ill. No one has said, well, Enron used a P&L and a spreadsheet to falsify things, so those tools are really suspect and in question, and we shouldn't use those. It's a means to help communicate ideas and connect people. When it comes to fundraising, we're dealing with human beings, and human systems and networks make decisions. And if we look at behavioral science, it gives us some interesting insights to how people actually make decisions. Like, do I invest in your fund? Do I buy? Do I vote? Do I volunteer? Do I do anything that we actually care about? The center of all behavior and decision making is actually in the limbic brain, or the primitive brain. It's also the center of our emotions. And the newer, more evolved part of our brain, the cerebral cortex, is responsible for all logic and reason and language and planning. We like to think that we are rational creatures and we make entirely logical decisions all the time. And science tells us otherwise. For most decisions and actions and behavior, the genesis comes from the limbic brain, our emotional brain. We decide what we want to do because of emotion, and then we craft the best alibi we can to construct from the data available with our prefrontal cortex. And the funny thing is, the alibi is so airtight that we don't even realize we're doing it. Why is this relevant to us right now? Well, if we want to influence people to give us money, to volunteer for our project, to partner with us, or whatever action we care about, we can't ignore the power of emotion. And this is even more relevant as we face some of the unique challenges from the global pandemic. When I say emotion doesn't have to be rainbows and glitter, and it doesn't have to be tear-jerking, and it doesn't have to be a picture of a starving child and Sarah McLachlan music playing in the background. Emotion is what unlocks behavior and what unlocks action. What are some of the unique challenges we're facing right now? This new normal, what does that even mean? By and large, everything is taking longer. By a lot of estimates, plan on things raises taking twice as long. Most capital is retreating to what is safe and familiar. Thankfully, money isn't moving out, but not a lot of new money is moving in. The investment that is happening is drawing in closer to core mission and directives and mandates. It's sticking with trusted partners far more than trying new players, at least new to them players. In-person pitches are gone, and virtual meetings are probably here to stay. And that also means shorter attention spans. And what does that mean for how we're presenting our stories and our pitches and our offerings? Oh, and by the way, This is even pre-COVID, but impact investing is no longer a differentiator. It's not something that makes you unique. It isn't fully mainstream, and we want it to be more mainstream. We want it to be the default setting. But at the same time, as we look at our offerings and our stories, just having an impact label doesn't make us stand out anymore. There's a lot of impact white noise. What do we do about this? One way to think of it is this is a massive problem, or maybe it's just a problem of mass. If we talk about Newton's laws of thermodynamics, getting something going always takes a lot of energy, whether it's raising a new fund or pushing a boulder up a hill. It takes a certain amount of force to overcome that inertia, the resistance of gravity and friction to move forward. So imagine we've all been doing this. We're pushing that boulder, and suddenly, because of a global pandemic, it's as if gravity just doubled from one day to the next. So the energy and force required to push that boulder up the hill just doubled as well. And that's what we're all facing. Uncertainty acts like inertia. The more of it, the more effort it takes to overcome. However, the force that we need isn't brute physical strength. It's actually trust. If we have enough trust, we can overcome uncertainty and get things moving. Right now, the amount of trust required just doubled overnight. Oh, and by the way, trust, it has an inextricable emotional dimension and not just cognitive. So let's take that into consideration as we think about what are some of the solutions to these challenges we're facing with fundraising. Everything is taking longer. Realizing and embracing the fact that it might take twice as long, it might take 10 times as long, we don't know. But embracing that also helps us realize the longer that sales cycle or longer that time window that we need to be communicating means that we need to do more to stay at top of mind. Necessitates more touch points and more intentional micro interactions. One of the things that is memories are short, and so we need to give something to remember, something that's memorable, especially as people take the more complex the decision-making process, the more we need to arm them with something that they can take up the decision-making chain of command. One of the most sticky things is stories that people can remember. Or is there some kind of visual, or is there something that is easy for your internal advocate to take that to the other parties that need to make that decision? You don't always get to be in front of all the people that are going to influence whether that investment decision happens. Uncertainty craves clarity. Have a clear message. Shorten the time it takes them to catch your vision. Can you boil it down of what your offering is, what the impact you're making? Can you boil it down to a single sentence? A great example, so some of you may be familiar with Jonathan Rowe's companies out of New York City. They invest in affordable housing, renovate them, make them green, help bring in social services to raise those people out of poverty and to create these communities of opportunity. Originally, their pitch was taking about 45 minutes before people around the table were like, oh, I get it. That's what you're doing. We helped them boil that down to a 3-minute short film that people are like, okay, I'm on board. Tell me what's next. So shortening sales cycles. Second thing, seeing that capital is retreating to what's safe and familiar. Doubling down on what you're known for, the best track record to showcase. Once again, it's how can we increase the amount of trust we can build, owning your superpower? What are you uniquely able to deliver? What are you known for? How do you leverage that